Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. If you are a fan of game shows, you may already know the voice you're going to hear on today's podcast. His voice can be heard on game shows, commercials, promos, infomercials, stage performances. He's even got a couple of books. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let me start by saying, Randy West, come on down. You're the next guest on the Someone You Should Know podcast. How you doing, Randy?
I am great. Thank you so much for the splendid introduction. I'm thrilled to finally talk with you. We've been planning this for a while.
Absolutely, Randy. And this is a real treat because, like you, I'm wrapping up 44 years in broadcasting. You've been doing this for more than 50 years. You're humble.
Ponderous.
50 years in broadcasting. So humble beginnings. Where'd you start off?
Oh, my God. A tiny radio station in Mount Kisco, New York. It was 2 rooms in an attic of a residential building. And, you turn the monitor up too loud and the woman who lived next door would come knocking on, turn that down. I mean, it's like crazy. A little tiny studio, but you get, your first job wherever you can. I had been on the college radio station in New York City and started driving in ever increasing concentric circles till I could find a small station that would let me in the door. And they did. And of all the people who were there, when I started, it was a top 40 station that transitioned to album rock. This is WRNW in Briarcliff Manor, New York. And lo and behold, the guy who replaced me after a couple of years through a format change and everything, finally, Howard Stern shows up.
I think I've heard that name somewhere.
Yes, you think so? My God, $50 million or some number like that per year. The guy is amazing. But, he's really compelling to listen to.
And after that, you wound up. When did you make your transition to television? Did you actually get a gig on the West Coast or what?
Yes. I came in with a gun and I said, I'm going on to television. Yeah. I've done a bunch of radio on the East Coast, New Haven, and on, Poughkeepsie, and got a chance to come out to L.A., paid for by Wayne Newton, because Joey Reynolds, who's a friend of ours, WKBW Buffalo, was working at 20th Century Fox Records. Wayne Newton was one of their recording artists, and lo and behold, he wanted to start his own record company, so he invited Joey to Las Vegas. I was on the East Coast, wanted to visit Joey in L.A. He says, change the plans, I'm going to Vegas. And I went, but you can come with us. It's on Wayne Newton's dime. So we met backstage with Wayne Newton after the show and started talking about his frustration with not being a priority at 20th Century Fox Records. And we talked ourselves into establishing a brand new record company. We weren't quite sure until he gave us his Amex number, whether he was serious. So I became national promotion director of an entire record company and associated Wayne Newton business. And that moved me to the West Coast. I'd always been in love with game shows and wanted to be in television, and just kept doing radio and record promotion until I found it which came through being a contestant. I'm looking to knock on the door any way I could. And I figured, well, if I can't get in, at least I could be around it as a contestant. And lo and behold, after 9 television game show appearances, I finally got a chance to be the announcer in some run-throughs and rehearsals. And that was the beginning of the beginning for me.
And what was your involvement with Johnny Olson? I heard that he mentored you and inspired you.
It's quite amazing. It's an amazing story. When I was a kid, 14 years old, sort of, and I used to be able to lie and say I was 16 to get into NBC at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and would go to watch tapings. And, before there's a taping, there's a audience warm-up. A guy comes out, goes, how's everybody today? And, New Yorkers are standing in line for an hour or two, and they've got a lot of attitude, but when they finally sit down and he comes out, the whole room is like a giant party. The man had an incredible ability to take an audience and herd them, and take a bunch of strangers and make them a cohesive little kind of family. And I was amazed by that, the old jokes that he told and the fantastic personality and his real affinity with strangers. He was magical. So I would keep going down to NBC to watch him, and I would eventually sit where his microphone stand was. Everyone wants to sit in the middle of a studio or in any audience, but I could find that the microphone stand was a little far left or far right, and I would always get a front row seat at the very edge because no one wants to sit there, but I like to sit there because I could watch him do his warm up. I could watch him read his copy, announce these shows. And I just must have been drooling because he smiled at me and that kind of stuff. And he gave me his old copy. He said, "You go home and practice on this. You can do this for a living if you're really interested," which was very empowering for a teenager.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the change came when he once said, "Who wants to get me a drink of water during the warm up?" And I don't know how many people behind me might have raised a hand. I certainly did. So he called me down. He kind of recognized me after multiple visits. And he put me in a warm-up act. "Who wants to get me water?" "I do." "Okay, come down here. Now, here's a cup, but go out the stage left, make a right turn. You'll see a water fountain, but don't get that water. That water's no good. Go all the way down the hall, go up another flight of stairs. You'll see a secretary desk there. Ask her. Well, actually, you don't have to. Make a left, and then you'll find a long hallway, and it's on and on with these convoluted instructions that can't be followed." So I'm like going, "Okay, Johnny," as he's describing this. And I walked off the stage, "Go get the water." So I left. And then I'm standing at the side of the stage in the wings. And obviously he doesn't want me to do all that. That was silliness. So I'm just standing there. What do I do now? And then he says, "Where's that kid with the water?" Well, now I'm in show business about 8 seconds, but I realize that's a cue, right? So I start to come back across the stage. "Don't trip over the cable." And as he said that, I made like I tripped, and I handed him an empty cup because I never got him water in the first place.
Right,
and he said, "You spilled it all," and he held it upside down. And I went, "Oh, Johnny, I'm sorry." And kind of went back to the seat going like this. The audience laughed. It was a turning point for me. So we became friends as I continued to visit. And if I can give you the amazing, what can I say, epilogue to this story. He came out in 1972 to Los Angeles. I didn't come out until 79. So 7 years. I went down to CBS. He was doing The Price is Right at that point, and I wanted to see him. "Hello, Johnny. You may not remember. Randy." I was like, wow, this guy remembers me from 7 years ago. I was a kid. Now I'm my 20s. Now we're friends on an adult level. And he taught me everything there is to know about warm up. He never gave me a job, but we'd go to dinner and he would explain, "This is why I do that. That's why I do this. And you can really do this for a living. Get yourself into radio and practice and hang around, get in wherever you can." He never got me a job, but encouraged me. He had no kids of his own and mentored me in a sense of telling me how to do the job. And I'll give you one epilogue to the epilogue.
Okay, go for it.
He passed away at 85, and that was the end of correspondence with him until 1999. He's dead 14 years. I get a phone call out of the blue. "Are you the Randy West who used to correspond letters with Johnny Olson?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, he saved some of your letters." And I'm like, wow, I mean, that's crazy. Well, Penny, his wife, is going into a nursing home. We're closing out the house. We're our nephew, actually. And there's boxes of stuff here that was personal effects that he kept from his career. Would you be interested in having any of that? And I was like, I'll be right over.
Absolutely.
So I got all of the memorabilia, artifacts, microphones, and the Emmy Awards and everything that he had, including an autobiography that he'd started and had an outline for. So in that sense, he taught me a whole lot.
Absolutely. Plus, you wrote a book about him, which we're going to talk about a little later in the show. I wanted to talk about another individual who I personally know that you worked with on The Price is Right, the late, great Rod Roddy. I remember him from KBW in Buffalo. Buffalo was KB, along with Dan Neverth and also
Joey Reynolds.
That whole crew. Working with Rod, how was that?
Don't be a dial twister. You'll get a KB blister.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rod was a friend from the 1970s on because of Joey Reynolds and Tom Chauvin, intermediaries who were, friends with both of us. So we were introduced over the phone. I didn't meet him till I got to Los Angeles. Visited the first time. I would have been like 78-ish. Then we became friends, and I would visit him down at The Price is Right. He loved the work. My God, he totally loved the audiences. He loved the unconditional, joy that he could feel when he entertained people. He was a born entertainer, born ham, might be another way of saying it. And we hung out together. He had a wicked sense of humor off stage, off mic. He was very sarcastic, and I enjoyed that. But the craziest thing happened, come 2003, He never took a colonoscopy. He ended up with an advanced cancer that was metastasizing throughout his body. And they were looking for people to fill in. They had a couple of people, and I went down to the show and saw the producer, and I said, hey, I don't know, but he said, I know your work, Randy. You do a supermarket sweep. And I said, right, exactly. Well, I know your bench is full, but if you're ever looking for another fill-in, I'd be happy, I'd be honored. So he said, send me a tape. Now, Rick, send me a tape is the oldest line in the world,
Exactly.
So I'm thinking, but send me a tape, Lottie, sure. But at the end of the day of visiting Rod and seeing the show and all this, don't forget to send me a tape. So I made a tape reading old scripts that Johnny Olson had given me and played some of the Price is Right music behind it. Next thing you know, I got like a week later, a phone call from Roger Dobkowitz, the producer of The Price is Right. Hi, Randy, it's Roger Dobkowitz at Price. I'm like, oh, wow, cool. Roger, nice to talk with you. He says, well, I want you to know, Bob and I were listening to your tape, and he's going on talking, and I'm like, Bob who? Do I meet a guy named Bob? Do I know oh, Jesus, he's talking about Bob Barker.
Bob Barker.
Oh, my God. Now, I'm tuned out during this who the hell is Bob moment. And I tuned back into and next thing I know, he's saying, we'd like you to come down and do a week of shows. And that week of shows of The Price is Right turned into a season, 2003, 2004, of periodic filling in. And from the stage of The Price is Right at CBS, I got hired for The Price is Right Live, which is a traveling stage show that continues now 20 years later.
Jeez, that's incredible. We're going to talk about that also a little bit later in the show, but let's go through some of the other game shows. You mentioned Supermarket Sweeps. You also mentioned The Price is Right. How about some other game shows that you might have announced for? Some of these might have just lasted for a couple of seasons or so, but go for it.
Yeah, right. The better known ones include the Newlywed Game in the years that Carney Wilson hosted that. That was like 2000-ish. Oh my God. Some of them are, here and gone. All New Three's a Crowd. And 21, the NBC production, I didn't announce it, but I did the audience warm up. And I did the same for not only 21, but Weakest Link. You all the Weakest Link. Goodbye. Yeah. And my God, if I looked at my resume, I might be surprised because a lot of it is just kind of, it's like, where did all that time go? But I remember being double and triple booked trying to, figure out a way to be three places at one time. It was very wonderful experience to be in that much demand. It was a true compliment of the highest degree to be like, can you do this show for us? I did warm up on Deal or No Deal with Howie Mandel. So a great number of shows. I could give you a long list, but those are the ones probably that are best.
Was there a game show that lasted a very brief amount of time that you actually liked?
It's going to sound corny, but I liked almost all of them. Mm-hmm. I really enjoy the camaraderie around the set and the whole milieu. It's a lot of intelligent people. You don't get into this business and stay unless you're sharp, bright, professional. I think of like a baseball team. I can't do what the lighting guy does. He can't, equivalent to I can't play first base. I don't know what the audio mixer does. I don't know. And they don't know what I do until the ball gets hit to me. And everyone's relying on each of us to do that subspecialty that we do with proficiency, professionalism, without fail, because nobody wants to stop tape. Oh, my God. The minute that someone says, stop tape, somebody's running up a bill of money because the clock is always ticking. Yeah, so the ability to ad-lib in the moment if necessary, to cover any mistakes, to be able to be relied upon was the golden gift. So being in that environment, I just loved it and made a lot of lifelong friends. I can't really think of a show that disappeared too quickly because there was always another one coming.
Yeah, it always seems like it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of great shows that I used to grow up on the game shows. My mom and I used to watch game shows all the time, and that kind of helped me be a better announcer through the years. Also, I mean, I didn't announce any game shows, but I did my share of commercials. I can tell you that much. Now, before we continue with our interview with Randy West, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I invite you to check us out on the web at SomeoneYouShouldKnowPodcast.com. There you're going to find our recent news, our archive of past episodes, and a whole lot more. And if you're visiting, we'd love for you to go ahead and leave us a review. You can find that on the bottom of the first page. We want to thank you so very much. So many cities around the world are listening into the podcast. 1,700 cities around the world in 80 countries. And some new additions, we'd like to say hi to Wilmington, Delaware, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada, and Hilversum, Holland. I used to listen.
Wow.
I used to listen to Radio Holland out there.
If I knew you had that many listeners, I would have dressed nicer.
Oh, that's okay.
I had no idea.
The Someone You Should Know podcast, heard wherever quality streaming audio is available. We'll continue with our interview with Mr. Randy West. You've got a couple of books. We started to mention the one about Johnny Olson. You have two books. One is called TV Inside Out, called Flukes, Flakes, Feuds and Felonies, and the Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time. I have to ask you, since Christmas is fastly approaching, and I would love to help you clear some of these things out of your warehouse. Tell us a little bit about each one of these books, and what I'll do is I'll include the links where people can buy these over the holidays, and I'll insist that everyone buys at least 10 copies of each. Okay?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, among all the things that Johnny had kept over the years, as mentioned, was an outline for a book he had hoped to write. He'd written in loose, unedited form a couple of chapters and had this entire outline. And I looked at that. I was like, wow, that's fascinating, as I started to read his stuff and put that together with the stories he told me. You know, he had a 58-year career going back to the beginning of broadcasting. I mean, like 1930s. And it's an amazing career at the beginning of radio and then experimental television into the mainstream of TV. He was on all the networks, daytime, primetime, working with Bob Hope and Jackie Gleason and you know, Frank Sinatra. What an amazing run he had. So taking his outline and the stories he told and what I thought he wanted to say in this book, I was able to finish it. Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time. And it's been very well received because there's no other source for the information that he collected himself about his career. You know, you might know you heard him on this, you thought of that, you once heard he did that show, but here was a compendium, an authoritative look back at his personal life, his family life, and his career. You know, he had that career, that clean, clear, clarion sound in his voice because his mother was hard of hearing, and she used to constantly say, really? Johnny, speak up, speak up. So he learned as a child, you know, to project and you know, have that style in his voice that would really clear. It was perfect for speakers in early television and radio because he could cut right through before there was high fidelity. And the other side of the thing, how did you ever learn to get this affinity with people? How do you know, you step out on a stage and people love you? And he said, I'm the youngest of 11 kids. And if I couldn't get along with other people, I never would have made it. Yeah. So a fascinating story. Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time. The other book, as you were kind enough to mention, I always have a copy handy because I'm amazed by it because it's 500 pages of amazing stories. You know, as you mentioned, 50 years in the business and the last 30 plus in television, even more than that, come to think of it, more like 40. You are backstage with, I mean, start naming celebrities and Johnny Carson and Bill Cosby and Joan Rivers and, you know, dozens of people that you run across because you're announcing a talk show or they're guest panelists on a game show or one way or another, you cross paths. And some of these backstage stories that these people have told me are phenomenal. I mean, did you know Desi Arnaz, the Mafia had a hit out on Desi Arnaz? I'm like,
whoa, what? No, I did not know that.
No, I had never heard of it too. And why? What was that all about? Well, as briefly as I can, and of course it's fully explained in the book, he did The Untouchables. He did a pilot for The Untouchables that aired, which is of course the story of Al Capone and, you know, the bootlegging and the Mafia era. And when that aired, he got a phone call from Al Capone's widow, May Capone, and she said, "Hey, my husband's name has been dragged through the mud enough already. Don't do this show." And he said, "Well, it's a best-selling book. I bought the rights to it. And if I don't do it, someone else will." And she said, "Well, if you know what's good for you, you won't do it." And he you know, I'm doing it anyway. So sure enough, he went ahead, started to do The Untouchables for ABC TV. And she called Sam Giancana and said, hey, I'm not happy with what Desi Arnaz is doing. Sam Giancana gave his permission, and I'll tell you how I got all this information, for her to put out a hit. And I went to a guy named Bomp. In the Mafia terms, everyone has an interesting name, nickname. And Bomp was about 2 weeks away from pulling the trigger. Sam Giancana dispatched Frank Sinatra to see Desi in their his Palm Desert home. They got drunk. He said, hey, don't do the show. And Desi threw him out of the house. I'm doing the show. Get the hell out of here if that's why you came to visit me. He reported back to Giancana, and the hit was on. And the only reason they got called off is because Giancana said, hey, we don't want to be the people known for knocking off Ricky Ricardo.
Yeah, there you go.
But how do you know all this? It's all part of the public record because Jimmy the Chin Fradiano turned to state's evidence and sang this whole story in front of Congress. So it's congressional record. It's real. So that's just one story that's fully explored.
Okay, I really recommend you get this for Christmas. I'm going to ask Santa for it right now. I'm going to write it on my list. It's called TV Inside and Out, The Flukes, Flakes, Feuds, and Felonies, and also the Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time. I'll have the links down in the show notes, and Christmas is fastly approaching. You've got an individual on your list who loves these kind of books. Go ahead and get 10 copies each, okay? You'll make everybody happy. You'll also make Randy happy, and Randy's going to cut you in for 10%.
There you go. Thank you.
Another facet of the Randy West Diamond you kind of alluded to earlier is your stage shows. Which ones are you part of now, and how can listeners become a future guest?
Wow. We do The Price is Right live. I'm not currently on the road. The show is, of course. Okay. I did it when we were in residence, so to speak, in Las Vegas for 3 years, Atlantic City for 2 years. We were in Reno. We were in Shreveport for a couple of years. Right now it's on a road trip, so I shied away from the bus and truck thing.
I understand.
Yeah, I did 3 months of it in a row. And it's like, whoa, this is just a little heavy for me. A lot of fun. I wouldn't change the experience, but I couldn't possibly live that as a lifestyle. So I get called periodically for that, as well as Wheel of Fortune Live. Now, that's another stage show based, of course, on the game show that just started. It started a few months ago, then was withdrawn because of the COVID was still cleaning up. And now it's back on the road doing one-nighters. Also a bus and truck traveling thing, a couple of nights in a particular town. Bob Goen, who hosted Wheel of Fortune on television, is hosting it now on the road. And for The Price is Right Live, again, they rotate notable names as the hosts. And the way to get on these shows, first of all, they are so true to the TV show that people just love it. I mean, who in the world doesn't want to be on The Price? Come on down, and you get down there, a new car. It's replicating all the games you've seen all these years. And we trade on the love that show has created, that I was a part of for a brief period of time on CBS. It's 52 years now, and Bob Barker and Drew Carey have created a great lot of goodwill, and we trade off of that. We come out on stage, and the audience is rabid with enthusiasm and excitement. Same with Wheel of Fortune, 41 years now with Pat Sajak. So these shows are wonderful. We choose the contestants out of the audience. So the way to be there is to be there.
Obviously. And what I'll do is I'll find the links on how people can find out where they are and also how to become a member of the audience. Now, Randy, the next feature is called Tales from the Road. This is primarily for musicians, but you have taken the show on the road. I'm sure you've had a couple of moments where things didn't go quite as planned. So what would you say Randy West's Tales from the Road might be?
I was on the bus broke down. How are we going to get to the next city? Are we going to borrow a bus? What are we going to have to do here? So it's not my problem, but it is in the spirit of the team, to get this thing going. So there have all been these logistical issues. But on stage, the funniest thing I ever saw, and I feel bad for the young lady who was involved, but there's a lot of excitement when you get to spin the big wheel on The Price is Right. Lots of excitement. And some people, when they get very excited, don't really know how to control the excitement. So we were standing on the stage, and the shadow cast by the big wheel on this woman's clothing seemed to be getting bigger. The shadow on her pants seems to be getting larger. It's like an optical illusion. Wait a minute, that's not the shadow. It's her pants are changing color. Oh my God. Yes. Exactly. And there she is in front of 1,000 people on the stage at Jubilee Theater, Las Vegas, at the Bally's Hotel. And there you go. And it has happened not just on the road with us. It happens at CBS. Now, when that happens, they do stop tape, and out come 3 people with hair dryers, to save the embarrassment. But when you're on a live show in a venue, in a theater, you have to grin and bear it. I feel bad for the young lady, but it's a memorable moment for everyone who was in that audience.
And I can imagine with the prices, right? You got so many gadgets and such. As far as you've got like the little miner or the little guy that goes up the mountain. You've got the Plinko ball, the things that fall down. There's obviously things that don't go right because you're constantly plugging and unplugging and such. It's got to be a challenge like that too. I'm sure you've had a couple of those stories too.
Oh my God! Well, everything for that show, and you're right. It's Race Game, and the Cliffhangers is the guy.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah. All these games that everyone loves, Plinko included, are on this tour, and the big wheel and all that. It fits into an 18-wheeler like a Tetris game. There's only one way it all fits into that 18-wheeler without a spare inch. And you're right. When you take it out and put it in, and take it out and set it up, and things go wrong. And thank goodness we had some really great tech people who are able to repair the electronics, certainly. And there's someone who's painting all this stuff every time it gets scuffed. So maintaining the equipment, I've never been on the road as a musician, but I'm sure there are similar requirements to, keep everything together. So everything from painting to putting together the electronics in the last moments before a show starts. So it's very, very exciting.
I can imagine. I can only imagine, yes. Not only does Randy do all the many things that we've talked about, but Randy is also skilled in, get this, folks, magic, dialects, certified hypnotist, corporate events host, state certified teacher in the California Post-Secondary School, California DMV traffic school instructor.
Hey,
you're
got to pay
jack
bills.
of all trades, Mr. Randy. Good Lord. Can you elaborate on these?
You take work and life as it comes. One thing begets another. None of these jobs I really applied for. They just kind of like fell in my lap. I had taken a hypnotherapy course because I was fascinated by, I'm trying to think, Anita, you can ring my bell.
Oh, Anita Ward?
Anita Ward, thank you. She had a relative who was going through cancer, as I recall. No, it was Minnie Ripperton.
Ripperton, Loving You, yeah.
Loving You. She has notes where only garage doors open. But she had a relative who was going through cancer treatment, and their pain was alleviated greatly by hypnotherapy. So she funded hypnotherapy classes for some select people, and I studied and was certified as a hypnotherapist because the opportunity presented itself, and I've been able to help people with smoking and eating and the relaxation techniques and that kind of stuff, which is a labor of love. I learned so much and want to give back because that came to me for free. The traffic school, well, I'm a born performer in California. To get people to go to this school versus that school to get their ticket removed from their driver's record, they have comedy traffic school. And so you go in there and you turn it into 8 hours of stand-up. You're teaching, of course, the information, but you've got quips and funny things happening through the whole 8 hours. And for anyone who does comedy, it's the best audience in the world because they can't leave. They're stuck for 8 hours. No audience ever walked out. Nobody ever walked out because they need the certificate at the end to say that they were there. So dialects came from doing commercials.
Obviously, yeah.
Voiceover. I mean, I've done speaking parts on a lot of sitcoms that have required, character voices. And the same is true for Big Brother. Now, I've recently done a handful of gigs for Big Brother. Those who watch the show know that there are challenges. Attention, housemates. Now we're going to do this. We're going to do that, whatever. And some of them are like inspired by baseball. So they need someone to go, holy cow, so-and-so, emulate the baseball thing.
Right, exactly.
Another one that was like K-Tel Records presents 17,000 hits in your, so different styles and permutations and accents have served me well with Big Brother and other applications. I forget what else you might have mentioned there, but it's all true.
Oh, yeah, very good. That's really, really cool. I've got lucky through my many years of working with the All-Star Radio Network. we did a lot of spoof commercials and spoof characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I got a chance to do many of those as well. And it's kind of fun. I'll never forget when my nephew was, I think, probably about 3 years old, and I was reading to him, and I was doing all the different voices, and everyone's looking at me going, how did he learn to do that? It's like, hey, it's on-the-job training, I guess you could say. How about links to all your social media? How can people reach you, Randy, if they want to reach out and find a little bit more about your books, to find about where you're going to be next and all that good stuff? What's good social links?
It's there's, first of all, you can go to Facebook for TV Randy West, Facebook TV Randy West. Okay. But the best place to see everything that's going on is a website, tvrandywest.com. All right. tvrandywest.com. Couldn't be any easier. And there's lots of fun information at both of these places. On the website, there's a tribute, a lengthy story of Johnny Olson and Charlie O'Donnell from Wheel of Fortune, who was a dear friend, and some of the other great announcers that we know well. I was happy to write a tribute, tell these people's stories, because they were so supportive of me when I got into the business. And on Facebook, every day there's new information about some historical event in television. Today is the day that NBC went to full color in the 1960s. And the last show to go color was Concentration.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, with the Rebuses, number 7, number 6. Yeah. Oh, it's a match. Now here's two pieces of the puzzle.
Bill Cullen did that show, right?
I think you're thinking of Hugh Downs, who did it. Jack Nars did it. Bill Cullen did every other game show.
Yeah, I know. Because
Bill holds the record with like 19 different shows.
Jeez, yeah.
But the reason Concentration was a holdout is the owner and producer of the show said, I don't want to go to color because these Rebuses, these puzzles, are going to look like funny pages, they'll be all full of color, and it's going to take away. And they agreed the background and all those puzzles will be brown, and the lettering will all be like an off-white. And we may make the set very colorful, but we won't fool with your puzzles. And that was the last show to give into color at NBC. So that happened this date in history. So I've got lots of that on the website for people who love television.
I love it. Any final thoughts we should know about Randy West that we haven't mentioned already?
Wow. Anything you should know about me? Well, probably that's about all anyone needs to know. Because any more and you'd be completely bored. Completely bored.
I don't think so. I think it's fascinating. Once again, I want people to go ahead and go down to the show links down there and get yourself a couple of copies of TV Inside Out, The Flukes, Flakes, Feuds, and Felonies, and the Johnny Olson, A Voice in Time. It is going to be ideal Christmas gifts for the person who loves game shows, who loves TV in general, and I really highly recommend you do that. Down in the show notes, make sure you get yourself a couple copies, okay?
I'm going to make a guarantee now. If you buy the book and you don't like any chapter in the book, rip the pages out, mail them back to me, and I will videotape myself eating these and send you the video. I will eat the pages you don't like.
Randy, it's been a real treat having you on the show today, man. God bless you. Thanks so much, and thank you for the job you do. And it's always fun getting with someone who's also in broadcasting and sharing war stories. It's always fun.
Great time with you, Rick. I really appreciate the invitation.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for tuning in to this episode of the Someone You Should Know podcast. Before I go, I want to share some friends of mine who also have a podcast. Give them a listen, and I invite you to check us out next time right here on the Someone You Should Know podcast. All right, here's my friends right now from the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.
Hey, everybody, it's Ray the Roadie.
And this is Hollywood Mike
with the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast, coming to you from the Illinois Rock and Roll Museum on Route 66 in Joliet, Illinois.
Where once a week we are interviewing local musicians and singer-songwriters. And the podcast itself covers a wide range of topics, including, but not limited to, the history of rock and roll in Chicago, the current state of the scene, and the challenges and opportunities facing musicians today.
So join us every Tuesday for a new exciting episode of the Rock and Roll Chicago podcast.